Greetings, everyone. The search for the IRGC in central Tehran began as Iranians rose up to take control of their destiny. Ladies and gentlemen, Iran is burning not only because of the explosions shaking Tehran, but also because of a smoldering fire of anger burning within its people. For the first time in modern history, a public hunt targeting IRGC members is taking place, signaling an irreversible turning point. Across Iran, a dramatic hunt is unfolding as the people themselves are tracking down IRGC members right in their own homeland. Iran's economy is gradually fading before our eyes, being strangled by the blockade imposed by the United States. Not only that, the elite of this regime are facing the risk of losing all the huge sums of money they once hid in foreign banks. The U.S. Department of the Treasury has just launched a new campaign called the Economic Fury, a thunderous blow that Iran could not have anticipated. Let's delve into these shocking developments, starting with the Iranian people directly confronting members of the IRGC. Just 2 nights ago, Muhammad, a notorious figure in the besieged forces, was stabbed 14 times by masked assailants and killed near Tehran. We seem to be witnessing the rise of a powerful wave of resistance, where people no longer wait but take matters into their own hands to determine their fate. This was even confirmed by a member of the IRGC last night, as on the very night of the assassination, a series of car bombings shook Tehran. At first, these explosions caused extreme alarm among the media. No one could say for sure whether these were car bombings or renewed airstrikes by U.S. and Israeli forces, especially when a ceasefire was in effect. But surprisingly, it was actually a commander of the IRGC base who posted a video admitting that these were car bombings carried out by regime opponents themselves. These people, whom the authorities often refer to with the hostile term reactionary agents, are the ones responsible. Hear their forced reassurances. Subscribe to Ghi & Go channel so you don't.
Không có thương vong nào cả. Không ai thiệt mạng, không ai bị thương. Mọi thứ vẫn diễn ra bình thường và tình hình hoàn toàn nằm trong tầm kiểm soát.
Miss any exciting videos.
Bảo vệ các anh em.
Those statements have revealed to us many harsh truths. First, it's clear that there is a resistance group operating right inside Iran, and they are becoming increasingly determined. However, we have yet to see the massive waves of protests like we did back in January. The reason behind this silence is that the Iranian government is still strictly enforcing the internet blockade. They are deeply afraid of another January situation, so they are doing everything possible to stop people from connecting, communicating, or sharing information with the outside world. The internet shutdown has now lasted for more than 1,100 hours, which means over 47 days as of now. By the time you hear these words, that number will have reached over 48 days. More than 90 million people are being completely isolated from the rest of humanity. This is an unprecedented event. 48 days is the darkest record for information lockdown in modern history. In fact, we've never had the internet as developed as it is now, so this can be considered the longest information blackout in human history. In the darkness of that isolation, the regime's crackdown campaign only became more brutal. Executions continued quietly, and dozens of people were arrested every day just for daring to criticize the government. They even confiscated all the property of poor citizens just because they dared to say they were unhappy with this war. But unfortunately for the IRGC forces, outrage will soon erupt more fiercely than ever because an economic disaster is smoldering and about to explode right in the heart of Iran. Look at the desperate warnings coming from within the government itself. The Central Bank of Iran is warning that the recovery process after this war could take up to 12 years. Since the U.S. blockade began, Iran's oil revenues have almost completely evaporated, even though this has always been the main lifeline the regime depends on. Cutting off the internet is also directly draining money from the economy. How will people conduct transactions? How can they order online, use credit cards, or conduct any kind of commercial activity without the internet? And this situation doesn't seem to show any signs of improving in the near future. Let's look at what Admiral Bratt just announced yesterday. The blockade of Iran's seaports has been thoroughly enforced as U.S. forces maintain absolute dominance at sea in the Middle East. It's estimated that up to 90% of Iran's economy depends on international maritime trade. In just the past 36 hours since the blockade took effect, U.S. forces have completely halted all maritime trade in and out of Iran. The economy is being squeezed to the point of suffocation. I want to emphasize an important detail. Iran has very limited crude oil storage capacity. They only have a certain number of storage tanks to store the oil that's being continuously extracted from underground. When the blockade is in place, Iran not being able to export oil abroad means that their storage facilities are running out of space, hour by hour, day by day. Soon, the government will have to face a life or death decision on whether to shut down the oil fields and completely halt production. This decision will have disastrous, irreversible consequences. Because when you shut down an oil field that's operating at full capacity, about 5 to 10% of that oil will be trapped permanently and can never be extracted again. There are complex technical reasons behind this, as water seeps into the oil layer when the field is shut down, making the oil at the bottom completely useless. That's why this regime really doesn't want to shut down the oil fields. They are facing the risk of losing hundreds of millions of dollars, an enormous amount of money that they simply cannot bear. According to detailed information from researchers, Iran probably only has about 1,316 days of storage capacity left for the oil it cannot export. When storage space runs out, they must cut production. This not only causes long-term damage to national output, but also leads to a skyrocketing unemployment rate, because oil is the heart and the source of revenue that accounts for 70 to 80% of the budget to maintain all government operations. Remember a painful lesson from history. When the Islamic Revolution broke out in 1979, one of the main reasons for the fall of the Shah's government was that by the end of 1978, the oil fields had stopped production. Immediately after that, the cash flow stopped, and everything fell into a chaotic spiral beyond control. By mid-January, the Shah had to flee the country and never return. Khomeini came to power, and the Islamic Republic was born. Now we are seeing the ghosts of history repeating themselves. If oil revenues are cut off for a long time, how can this regime pay the IRGC members? What will they use to pay the besieged forces, the oil workers, and to maintain the massive infrastructure they have worked so hard to build? A cascading collapse is now more evident than ever. And then, the harsh truth is right before our eyes. The lifeline of this regime is about to stop flowing completely. Up to now, a total of 10 Iranian ships have recklessly tried to break through the U.S. blockade, and every time, the result has been bitter failure. The most astonishing thing is that the U.S. Central Command is publicly providing detailed updates on every step they have taken to stop these ships. Just yesterday, an Iranian ship tried to hug the coastline and sneak into the Indian Ocean, with the likely goal of heading to China to unload the waiting oil. Immediately, the USS Supreme's warship appeared, closed in and forced this ship to quietly turn back to Iran. The message delivered is strong and clear: nothing can get in and nothing can get out. Even so, those blows were still not fatal enough for Iran's dying economy. The U.S. Department of the Treasury launched a new campaign alongside military operations with a powerful name: Operation Economic Fury. Operation Economic Fury was essentially a full-scale offensive aimed at maintaining maximum pressure on the entire Iranian economy. Financial institutions, and especially banking systems around the world, were put on red alert, particularly those holding or moving Iran's illicit funds. The U.S. Department of the Treasury issued a strong warning that they were ready to impose secondary sanctions on any organization that continued to tolerate Iran's activities. But more importantly, a key detail is emerging. The short-term waiver that allowed Iran to sell oil floating at sea will officially expire in the next few days and will definitely not be renewed. To put it simply, the sanction relaxations we discussed a month ago will completely disappear, making it harder than ever for Iran to find buyers for its oil. As soon as this campaign started, the U.S. Treasury Department sent direct letters to banks in China, Hong Kong, the UAE, and several Middle Eastern countries. This is when the situation became even more dire for Iran because of the mistakes they brought upon themselves. Iran has continuously attacked Gulf countries that had nothing to do with this war. Although those countries never allowed the U.S. to use their airspace, it's important to remember that before the conflict broke out, Iran relied heavily on these countries, especially the UAE, to conduct cross-border transactions in order to circumvent U.S. sanctions. Now, the UAE has even more reason to cooperate closely with Washington to ensure that Iran has no way out. This will turn the lives of Iranian officials and elites into a living hell, as the millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars they have stashed abroad as a safety net for the day the regime collapses now face the risk of being completely frozen. The safety net they have painstakingly built over the years now seems to be vanishing into thin air. In a recent statement, U.S. officials affirmed that Operation Economic Fury had been prepared for a long time to exert maximum pressure, not only cutting off Iran's state revenue sources, but also directly targeting the accounts of the IRGC forces. Iran's deadly mistake of bombing neighboring countries in the Gulf Cooperation Council has now led these nations to be willing to increase transparency and thoroughly investigate the money flows within their banking systems. The United States has requested the freezing of numerous accounts belonging to the ISIN leadership and the IRGC, while also sending an ultimatum to all countries. If they continue to purchase oil or hold money for ISIN, the price to pay will be extremely severe secondary sanctions. This is truly a brutal financial war, with destructive power equivalent to battles on the actual battlefield. On the diplomatic front, dialogues are still taking place in a tense atmosphere, with hopes for a peace summit or at least an extension of the ceasefire. Although it seems that the United States and Iran will not have any meetings this week, all hopes are now focused on next week's efforts. Recently, Pakistan's Army Chief General A.C. Munir personally traveled to Tehran to convey the request from the United States and seek a way out of the current situation. Washington's demands are very specific. First, Tehran must immediately reopen the Strait of Hormuz in accordance with the spirit of the ceasefire agreement. The United States has kept its word by halting airstrikes, but so far, Iran has not fulfilled its commitment to reopen this important maritime gateway. The second requirement is that Iran's next delegation to the talks must consist of people with real authority, capable of negotiating and signing final agreements, to avoid repeating the hopeless scenario of the previous talks, which lasted 20 hours without producing any concrete results. The United States quickly realized an ironic truth. The people present in the negotiation room actually had no real authority to decide or approve anything. That's exactly why the talks had to be paused, allowing the Iranian side to return home and seek guidance from those who truly hold the ultimate power. That could be the supreme leader or some powerful figure working behind the scenes. Only when they get the final approval can they return with a real agreement. And now it seems that the moment for that fateful meeting is drawing very near. As of now, it has been 46 days since Operation Epic Fury began. The ceasefire between the United States and Iran is still being tenuously maintained while intense diplomatic efforts are underway. This week, the President of the United States revealed that the negotiators may soon resume talks in the coming days, with the expected location possibly being Islamabad. In an interview last night, he stated that the economic impact of this war is limited and expressed his belief that the conflict is gradually coming to an end. On the other side of the front line, Iran also confirmed that messages are still being continuously exchanged between the two sides. Since the delegation of the Islamic Republic of Iran returned to Tehran on Sunday, several key messages have been exchanged via Pakistan as an intermediary. The spokesperson for Iran's Ministry of Foreign Affairs affirmed that their position has been made clear both at the direct negotiation table and through these exchanged messages. However, while diplomatic language is still being carefully considered, on the ground, the United States Central Command continues to tighten its encirclement at Iran's seaports with the overwhelming presence of more than 10 support ships. Admiral White Cooper, the commander of CENTCOM, described the brutality of the strike when he declared that the comprehensive blockade of Iran's seaports had been thoroughly enforced, affirming the absolute control of U.S. forces over the seas in Central Europe. This is a devastating blow, because up to 90% of ISIN's economy depends entirely on international maritime trade. In less than 36 hours since the blockade order was implemented, the U.S. military has completely paralyzed all foreign trade activities to and from Iran by sea. While diplomatic efforts are still racing against time, military preparations continue quietly and resolutely. Thousands of U.S. reinforcements are moving toward this area, with the main force centered around the massive aircraft carrier strike group U.S. George Hart VKB. In the skies, convoys of transport planes and military cargo aircraft continue to land in the Middle East, bringing equipment and deterrent power, ready for any sudden developments in a political crisis full of dangerous variables. In your opinion, could history from 1979 repeat itself once again if the flow of oil revenue, the regime's only lifeline, is officially cut off? Do you believe that Iran will choose to open the Strait of Hormuz to save its economy? Or will it accept a cascading collapse to protect its dignity at the negotiating table?